guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be talking about person first versus identity first language. Now that might sound a bit random and confusing. I'll explain it all, but it does relate to a video I made prior about using the term map instead of the other term that will probably get me stuck somewhere in the purgatory of the algorithm. So I'm not going to say it, but you guys know the P term. Anyway, I want to talk about that, and that relates to person first versus identity first language, and I just want to start with that because it contextualizes everything. And I'm going to explain all the terminology so it's not confusing, I promise. Before we get into that though, I did want to thank today's sponsor, which is Scentbird. Scentbird is a fragrance subscription that gives you the opportunity to shop from over 600 brands. The cool thing too is that it's flexible, so if you want to skip a month, you can with no penalty. It can be hard to commit to buying a full-sized bottle of a new perfume, so Scentbird allows you to get a 30-day supply so then you can decide what fragrances are right for you. You can also upgrade to receive 2 to 3 products each month. Scentbird also pairs you with fragrances you're likely to enjoy by including a quiz. Based on your preferences, previous purchases, and quiz answers, Scentbird will ensure to pair you with what you like. This month, I received Promenade sur le Rocher by Grâce de Monaco, Align by Good Habit, and Blush by Rebecca Minkoff. Personally, my favorite is Align by Good Habit. Make sure to use code READYTOGLARE to get 30% off your first month at Scentbird, meaning it's only $11 for your first month. Additionally, Scentbird is also now available in Canada. Thank you, Scentbird, for sponsoring this video. So there's such a thing as person first language versus identity first language. Person first language is like saying a person who is autistic. That's person first. And then identity first is an autistic person. They're pretty self-explanatory. I was kind of curious because I know that there's been a lot of discourse, especially in disabled communities, about should we do person first or identity first? Now, obviously, I'm on the outside, so I'm not saying which one is correct. I'm just commenting on what I've seen is happening. So I decided to look into it, and I found an article, and the article was titled, How Autistic People Are Showing the Limitations of Person First Language. Now, part of the article says, many style guides point out that when it comes to autism, the preference among autistic people is for identity first, aka an autistic person, language over person first language, like a person with autism or person with autism spectrum disorder. For this reason, BuzzFeed's current style is to use the phrasing autistic person over person with autism unless it appears in a direct quote. We also advise writers to ask someone how they would like to be identified whenever possible and defer to their preference. Obviously, it's not a monolith, so not every single person with X will like the same terminology. It's very much a personal choice, but I thought that was interesting. I asked my friend Ricky, who's here on YouTube, I'll link her channel down below, but Ricky talks a lot about the deaf community. Ricky is part of the deaf community, and so I asked Ricky, hey, what is not necessarily the consensus, because not everyone will agree, but what's your take on this? What do you prefer? And Ricky told me, deaf people definitely prefer deaf and hard of hearing and identity first as a consensus. Person who is deaf or even people with disabilities and the like isn't necessarily like banned or really bad, it's just when abled people tend to only ever say that, especially over and over again, in a single paragraph, and it's like disabled, deaf, autistic aren't bad words, you know? They're just descriptors. If one has to take my deafness away to see me as a human, then that becomes a big old problem. I mean, some folks will prefer person first, so like if you wanted to refer to someone singularly, always good to ask that person themselves, but generally as a group, deaf people, disabled people, blind people, etc. is fine / usually the way to go. There's no monolith. I'm not saying Ricky speaks for everyone, but I just wanted to get the perspective from someone else in a different community. So the reason why I'm bringing up this person first versus identity first argument is because there is a movement to do that in the community of sex offenders. Can you call that really a community? But basically, I read an article, Colorado State Board drops sex offender term, calling it a negative label. Okay. I'm sorry, but if you're a sex offender, that is a negative label. What, like, I'm sorry, is that supposed to be a positive label now? Are we supposed to pretend that sex offender is a compliment? I just don't understand how we're gonna turn that into a positive label or a label that's not negative or a neutral label at all. I don't understand why anyone would want to. And that's why I'm saying it's related to my prior video about the college professor, because I feel like we're inching towards the same direction of trying to minimize what people have done and crimes they have committed, which I just don't understand the point of. This might sound really bitchy, and I'm not really sorry about it, but it's the feel-goodery of it all that pisses me off, because not everyone deserves to feel good about their life choices. If one of your life choices was to assault someone, I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you that you should feel good about yourself and about that choice. So, if you assault someone and you get put on the sex offender registry, I'm not going to try to convince you that you should be okay or happy about that. Am I suddenly in the twilight zone? The way sex offenders are labeled is changing in Colorado. The board that sets state standards voted today to change the term sex offenders to reflect so-called person-first language. So there was a vote on a board, and in the end, the board voted 10-6 to go with adults who commit sexual offenses. I think this strikes a balance that honors the impact to victims and recognizes the current and ongoing impacts of sexual assault, but also avoids the labeling term that has negative impacts on those who commit sex offenses. Jessica Daughter with the Colorado District Attorney's Council worries the change won't end with the Sex Offender Management Board. I'm concerned that the use of person-first language generally is an intent to remove accountability from offenders and to diminish the experience of victims. Yes, Jessica. See, now finally we have someone here who has their feet on the fucking ground. Jessica Daughter, I completely agree with her. The use of person-first language here, in this respect, I think is to separate the two things. Because when you say sex offender, those are two words. That's bam, you have everything there. But when you have person who committed a sexual offense, the whole point of person-first language is to humanize, right? That's fine in all the other sectors of humanity, like with any community with disabilities, like we talked about the autistic community, the deaf community, whatever other community, that makes sense. And there I support whatever they want to choose, if they want identity first or person first. But here, trying to have that here, I think is spitting in the face of victims. And I think it's deeply disgusting and unfair to victims to try to destigmatize the people who attacked them, assaulted them, whatever happened to them. Genuinely, if I think about the person who assaulted me and I think about people wanting this person to feel less stigmatized, why? Like, they chose to assault someone. Like, why do they deserve to feel less stigmatized? If we destigmatize assaulting people, then isn't that kind of going down the route of saying, oh, it's okay, we'll find a nice little name for you that'll make you, like, seem more humanized? And it's like, we know they're humans. We just know that they're humans that made horrible, horrible decisions, horrible choices. No one's forgetting that they're human. And I just don't understand why we need to humanize them further and make them furtherly, I guess, socially acceptable. I don't understand. And I completely disagree with, I think it strikes a balance that honors and impacts the victims and recognizes the current and ongoing impacts of sexual assault, but also avoids the labeling term that has negative impacts on those who commit sex offenses. You should have a negative impact if you commit sex offenses. There's a reason that things are illegal. I am losing my shit. Like, I genuinely see these news and I hope it's some kind of satire website, and then it's not. Last year, lawmakers considered a bill that would have, among other things, eliminated the term sexually violent predator from statutes, but they ended up pulling it. Meanwhile, a task force charged with sentencing reform is considering asking the legislator to change terms like defendant, convict, and felon to justice-involved people. It would be just justice-involved people, which to me is moronic, because I could say a judge is a justice-involved person. Like, that's so broad. Anyone involved in justice who's not a criminal would be lumped in with people who are convicts and felons. That's why I wanted to talk about identity first versus person first differentiations, mainly because I think there are communities who should have the right to choose, like I said. But here, we're trying to separate people from their crimes, and I just don't know why we would do that. The thing that concerns me the most is that this is touching on sex offenders specifically. And as we've discussed before, it seems like there has been a push to normalize just behavior and actions that are degenerate and completely disgusting and that are inexcusable, and to try and make the people who committed these acts more favorably viewed. I'm not gonna ever be here for that. It's not happening. Trying to appease the people who are committing these awful acts is something I don't understand, and I'm frankly angry about, as you can tell. Anyways, guys, you can let me know what you think. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.